everyone, and welcome to the first ever episode of the National Conservative here on the Freedom Broadcasting Network. My name is Vince Dow. I'm an 18-year-old conservative commentator from California, and I'm very sorry, okay? I'm sorry some people do have to be from there. And really on this show, we want to give you all of the up-to-date news and current events from a truly conservative perspective. But first, a little bit about me. So I've been doing conservative commentary actually since I was 15 years old. And I've kind of built this base on social media as like an influencer on Instagram and Twitter. I'm known as @TheVinceDow, and I'm also the founder, vice president, and chief spokesperson of the American Populist Union, which is a nonprofit organization designed to fight for true America First ideals. And last year, I was actually featured in Newsweek magazine's top 12 conservative up-and-comers. But I think enough about me, right? It's much better to learn about me through hearing what I have to say. And that's exactly what we're going to do. So we're going to be talking about a lot on this show, but I think it'll be a good idea to first really step back and frame the issues that are going on in our country through sort of a wider scope, because there's so much happening in America at such a fast rate that I think honestly sometimes it's easy to really lose sight of the bigger picture amidst these day-to-day policy debates. And I don't want any of my viewers to do that, because I think maintaining the big picture is always so important. So before we talk about anything, I think I'd like to first step back and really ask this fundamental question, which is, what is the American question of the 21st century? That is to say, what exactly is that question, that ideological divide that drives our politics today? And the reason why I bring that one up specifically is because I noticed that a lot of conservatives, especially those who grew up in the 20th century and lived through the Cold War, always seem to label it, as I notice, as still being the debate between capitalism versus socialism. But personally, I don't think that really is what's going on today anymore. And the big reason I say that, if you want to point to some evidence of that, if this were still a debate between capitalism and socialism, why exactly are the big corporations seemingly on the side of the socialists? Clearly, right? You see what I'm saying? Clearly something else is going on here. And personally, I believe that the American question of the 21st century is not one between capitalism and socialism. Rather, it is one between nationalism and globalism. That is to say, does America remain one nation under God? And definitely don't forget the under God part. It's equally as important. But for the purposes of this debate, does America remain one nation? And that is to say, does America remain one people in one place defined by one shared heritage for the most part, right? One shared heritage, history, culture, language, religion, all those sort of unifying factors of a country, etc., right? Or does it become none of those things? Does it lose all of those aspects of its own national identity for something that is totally different, for something that is more akin to a global identity? This is to say that, do we preserve the concept of e pluribus unum, out of many, one? Or do we become out of one, many? I think Pat Buchanan put it very well in Suicide of a Superpower back in 2011. He wrote, and I quote, "Is a nation not a people of a common ancestry, culture, and language, who worship the same God, revere the same heroes, cherish the same history, celebrate the same holidays, share the same music, art, poetry, literature, etc.?" Now, the nationalists believe that it is. The nationalists believe that America is one nation defined by one place and one people. Like, this is America. Like, here, this place is America. And hence, because of that, the loyalty of the American regime should be to this nation and to this people, because America, after all, is indeed a nation. It is one people, it is one place at a specific time in history. And by the way, this is the view that most Americans have held for most of our country's history. But on the other hand, especially following the decades after the Cold War, a new idea has arisen. The globalists. The globalists do not believe that America is one nation, one place, and one people. But instead, rather, they kind of believe that America is sort of this vague and unclear idea, essentially like floating in space and can be sent to anywhere. And because the actual nation state that is America does not exist, right, in their eyes, because there is no American nation, this idea can be sold out, outsourced, exported, and conquered all around the world, whether it's to Afghanistan, Syria, Libya, Iraq, China, you name it. In their eyes, there is no American nation. In their eyes, America is simply one global idea and like a 21st century pseudo-empire and sort of a one-world transnational government can be formed off of this idea. Now, when one pictures this debate and when you picture this debate, you're probably mainly thinking of foreign policy. That's kind of the first image that comes to your head, right? But really, I would argue it goes far beyond foreign policy. It goes far beyond how many countries you do and don't want to invade. Really, I think this question of what is America? Is it a nation state or is it a global idea? This question is all-encompassing, and it really guides most, if not all, I think, of all of our substantive policy debates that go on in America today. Because on one hand, yes, obviously it dictates our foreign policy. If one believes that America is one nation state, then they will seek to preserve that nation state, and they don't believe in involvement in pointless, endless foreign global wars that are of no benefit to the nation. After all, the first priority should be the nation. But if one is a globalist, they do believe that the American empire and the idea of America, whatever that is in their eyes, can and needs to be spread around the world because everyone needs to be a part of America by force if necessary. But it goes far beyond the debate of foreign policy, though it's certainly a key aspect of it. For instance, take the issue of trade and the sort of role of corporations in American society. Since the fall of the Cold War, this sort of new idea of a transnational corporation has become quite prominent, right? Now, you have supposedly American quote-unquote companies like Nike and Apple have gone global. You see this happening in our country today, right? And in the process, companies like this have shipped their labor and their jobs overseas to countries like China, and evident by actually the political stances that you now see many of these big companies taking, and I think you know what I mean by that. These companies have become not loyal to the American nation, rather they are loyal to the globalist order. That's what they're loyal to. They are no longer American companies. And in the process of everything they've done, they've clearly hollowed out, and you see this if you drive inland from the coastal cities, kind of go to the middle of our country, you can see in the process of this economic globalization, they've hollowed out and ruined much of Middle America. But they don't care. They don't care. They fundamentally don't care because these global companies don't feel any sort of corporate social responsibility to the American people and the American nation because they believe not such a thing exists, at least in their eyes. And so to relate this back to the sort of core question that we're asking here, this debate is essentially whether these companies are and should be American companies, right? Are they American companies or are they transnational companies? Are they global companies with sort of no concept of borders and no real loyalty to any one nation in particular? It's a very important question. Ultimately, it is the question when we dictate policy for corporate America. Now, on the issue of trade, for instance, here's another issue. If one believes in the American nation, it's quite obvious as to why if you were to set up a nation, right, you would want that nation, wouldn't you, to be self-sufficient. And hence, you would want that nation to produce and manufacture much, if not basically all of its essential goods at home. Because you believe in a nation, you're a nationalist. But on the other hand, if America is not a nation, but is simply kind of an idea in like one big global network and global economy, why should we have any interest in keeping our manufacturing jobs here at home? I mean, after all, if somewhere like China is just as much America as somewhere like America itself, and we're all just one big global family, and we're all global citizens after all, why not move your manufacturing to somewhere where it's cheaper to produce? After all, the consequences that it has on the American workers doesn't matter. And big corporations love this, obviously. There's obviously a reason why it's big corporations that really have embraced economic globalization the most. It's no accident. Even take the issue of immigration, which is probably like one of the most important debates in our country today, right? Now, here's the thing. If you believe that America is one place and one nation with one culture and one history, e pluribus unum, you're obviously going to be pretty strict about who you allow into that nation, right? Because this is a unique place. It is not anywhere. This is a unique place. So you would seek to preserve the uniqueness of America with your immigration policy and with your policy in general. But if you don't believe that America is a nation at all, and you simply believe that it's just this like one global idea, then why not say, and why wouldn't you say, that anyone from anywhere, no matter who they are, what place and what culture they come from, or what they believe, or anything about them, anyone can participate in the idea that is America? If you believe that, why should we have any form of any restrictions in our immigration system? After all, we're all global citizens. Like, borders don't exist. The nation doesn't exist. All of us are the same. America is not unique as a nation. It has no unique attributes. Anyone from all around the world, from wherever, can embrace and become equally as a part of this as regular Americans. Why would you be under this worldview? Why are you any more American than anyone else around the world? And the globalists don't believe that you are. And this is fundamentally why the nationalists believe in strong borders and the globalists believe in basically none at all. Even really basic issues, I would say, like the debate over our country's shared history and heritage, right? In America today, you obviously see a lot of people trying to rewrite, revise, tear down, erase, burn, destroy our nation's history and our nation's heritage. Well, this is in no way disconnected from the debate between nationalism and globalism. After all, the globalists do not believe that America is unique as a place, a people, and a nation. And so hence, they don't believe that there is any value in preserving and conserving the things that make America unique. You know, our heritage, our history, our culture. And as a matter of fact, the globalists see this as sort of being in the way. They see it as a hindrance to making America one global idea. Because after all, if there are unique aspects of America that do not exist across the rest of the globe, that makes it much harder for America to become sort of a universal idea. And so fundamentally, they actually seek to strip away those aspects of the American nation. And there are so many more, really, political debates we can mention and we can sort of tie into this. But for the interest of time, we're already running kind of long on this. We won't go over them. But really, I would say it involves everything in our politics. Because I fundamentally believe that the way you fundamentally view America guides what you believe the vision for that nation that is America should be. It is like literally the most important question you can ask yourself and the most important decision that can guide your policy beliefs. Now, if all of the issues that I just mentioned, by the way, sound familiar to you, it's because they should and because they are familiar. This is the message that Donald Trump campaigned off of in 2016 and, should I note, won off of in 2016. And when viewed through this lens and this sort of divide that I just mentioned, the political divide in our modern politics becomes so much more obvious and so much easier to understand, right? It's very clear that people like Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton stand on the side of the globalists. They don't believe that America is one unique nation, and hence no national aspects of America that are unique are in any way worth preserving. On the other hand, Donald Trump and his supporters did believe in the American nation state, and they did believe that America was one nation. But it should be noted, by the way, this is very important, equally important. It should be noted that not every so-called conservative actually believes in conserving the idea of the American nation. Obviously, Donald Trump did. At his acceptance speech for the RNC in 2016, Donald Trump famously remarked that, quote, "Americanism, not globalism, will be our credo." And this is a sentiment that I would say most real conservatives in America honestly agree with. But this is not necessarily a message that was actually shared by conservative leaders of the past, right? In fact, it was actually George H.W. Bush that delivered a polar opposite message following the fall of the Soviet Union when he said that basically this was America's chance to establish a, quote, new world order and to spread so-called democracy around the world. This was obviously a very globalist viewpoint, but keep in mind, This was not a liberal. This was not a Democrat saying this. This was a so-called conservative. And that's what you need to keep in mind. And this is fundamentally the reason why Donald Trump and his supporters are fundamentally, were and are fundamentally so at odds with so many within the Republican Party in a way that has not really been seen before by past Republican presidents in the modern era. That's precisely because not every person that calls himself a conservative or a Republican actually believes in conserving the American nation, and that is so clear. It could not be more transparent today. So don't forget, as we sort of trek ahead in our political journey together, do not forget that the Republican Party and the so-called conservative tent is probably equally ridden with globalists as the other side is. But to really back up here and to really conclude here, always remember that this century is not a question of whether or not, okay? As much as you might hear stuff about, capitalism and socialism, the question of this century is not whether our economy is a free market economy or a centrally planned economy. That's not what's really going on here. This battle actually runs much deeper than that. This is a question of whether our nation survives as a nation or whether it is sacrificed to the will of the rest of the globe in order to make, by the way, we should mention, a small number of transnational elites very powerful and very rich. And so as we talk about all the issues in America on this show, this is something that I want you to always keep in mind. Never lose sight of the big picture, folks. And despite all of the conservative establishment talking points that you hear about socialism and about big government, which, not to say that those aren't issues, but the nationalist versus globalist debate, this is truly the divide in America, and this is truly what's going on. And never forget, by the way, that to stand with a globalist is to stand with a small number of wealthy global elites, and by the way, with a lot of other people around the world. But to stand with the nationalists is fundamentally to stand with the American people. Now, we've chosen our side. I think it's time for our leaders and our politicians to choose theirs. Well, that was pretty long-winded, wasn't it? But I don't really regret it because I think it was a very important discussion that we all need to be having. But that is to say that we don't have a lot of time left on this show to actually talk about politics. But before I let you go, I would be remiss if I did not mention the big major news event of this week, which is that Joe Biden is scheduled to give his joint address to Congress this week, which is kind of like the State of the Union, except when it's your first year in office. And, let's talk a little bit about this, okay? And I don't think it's really worthwhile to actually go over anything Joe Biden actually said himself in that joint address of Congress, because even if what he was saying actually mattered and had substance to it, he's not running the country. We all kind of know that. He's not really a living, breathing, present entity that actually has real thoughts and real decisions and real policies. So considering that, it's Joe, I don't think it's really even worth our time to mention what he actually said. But it is kind of, I think, important to discuss what kind of is the state of this union. What is happening? What does Joe Biden's America look like? Obviously, if you're tuned into the mainstream media, they basically have been painting Joe Biden's America as something of a utopia, actually. Like, you see these genuine headlines from newspapers like the Washington Post, literally comparing Joe Biden to FDR, and I'm just like, what? Okay, but I think it's pretty clear, it's pretty obvious as to why this has been happening, which is that the Joe Biden candidacy, the Joe Biden election, quote unquote, if you want to call it that, and the consequent Joe Biden presidency really had nothing to do with Joe Biden. Rather, it was a big collusion by America's elites, those transnational globalist elites that I mentioned in the previous monologue, to really take back the power that was a little bit threatened by them during the previous years. And so this was a collusion of not just like the Democratic Party. No, it encompassed all major institutions in American society, many that are supposed to even stay out of politics. So it wasn't just the Biden campaign and the DNC. It was the news media, it was academia, it was big tech, it was corporate America. It was all of these major institutions in American society working together. And just because that election is over and just because they got their guy in power doesn't mean that relationship is over, because obviously you see that Joe Biden he generally he struggles. It's called a little struggling. He does a little bit of struggling, okay? And so as a result, he still needs the news media and all these other institutions to really carry him on their back. And they do, because they are terrified of the prospect that anyone like Donald Trump could ever come along and threaten the power of our elites today. And so you will never see an honest assessment of what's going on in our country, an honest assessment of the state of our union from journalists. And I know the media was not exactly really unbiased before, but it has just become so much worse, and I think it's precisely become so much worse because the power has now consolidated. You are now at the part where even if a lot of news media companies before were sort of kind of corporate and stuff like that, there was some degree of independence. Now you have none. All of the power of the aristocracy, essentially, in American society has now consolidated around Joe Biden, and that power is not going away anytime soon. And so you will not hear any type of honest messaging in any honest state of our country from people like that, but you will hear it from people like me, because I'm not one of the elite. I'm not the establishment. I'm not the aristocracy that's sort of all gathered around together. So I see, and I think you see, regular people really see what's happening in America today. They don't have their head so far up their rear end that they think Joe Biden is FDR or Jesus or something like that. Okay, so here's the real state of our country. So yeah, despite all the campaign ads that Joe Biden ran about, being from Scranton, Pennsylvania, Joe Biden's America is not an America of the working man, of the regular person. You see, increasingly, as I just mentioned, it is a society ran and rigged by the aristocracy, ran by our elites. And that's not to say, and as a conservative, I fundamentally believe that society is hierarchical. So it's not that I think all elites are necessarily bad, but the elites currently running our society have clearly really rigged this system against the American people. After all, America has long been a nation that has prided itself off of opportunity. But where is that opportunity in Joe Biden's America today? It's obviously hard to even find a regular job looking at the current state of the economy, but if you want to operate the real American dream, which is, usually seen as starting your own small business, we obviously learned from the Biden aisle of politics that is no longer possible. But even if you would like to, maybe get lucky and play the stock market and invest to make your wealth, yeah, well, they've now announced that you really can't, and they don't want you to be able to do that either. This is the America, then, of Joe Biden. Joe Biden's America is a country in which ordinary people have been cast aside and abused by a selfish political elite. And that's all you really need to know. That really is the state of this nation. And with that being said, guys, thank you very much for tuning into the first ever episode of the National Conservative here on the Freedom Broadcasting Network. We will see you guys all next week. But in the meantime, if you guys would like to keep up with me, you can always follow me on social media. I'm available on Instagram and Twitter at the Vince Dow. And you can also check me out on YouTube, simply my name, Vince Dow. But until then, you guys, thank you very much for watching. Have a great rest of your day, and I hope to see you soon. Thank you very much, guys.